This is Rule of Law News. I'm going to talk about internal affairs, various internal affairs divisions or bureaus in the police departments across America and why, as a whole, as a generalization, they don't work. I mean, there may be exceptions, but as a whole, they don't work. Well, you got to look at first the chief policymakers in the police department. Either the chief policymaker will be like, for example, the chief of police. Uh, he could be the sheriff. He could be whatever label they put him on as the top person in the department, whatever labels they use. Different municipalities use different labels for the top person. But once that chief of police is in, the chief of police is supposed to direct everything, direct all the conduct of the subordinates by properly training them, properly hiring the proper people, properly, if they go beyond what they're supposed to do, then you're supposed to terminate them and all the other things. So the, these police officers are supposed to follow what they've been adequately follow what their training is. Now, if they fail to follow their training, the question is it inadequate training, or is it was it intentional that they're not following their training, or is it that the unofficial policy is superseding the official policy and guiding him contrary to his training, official training, and telling him to do stuff that's maybe not what he was supposed to be doing? So, for example, if there are quotas in the police department, arrest quotas, ticket quotas, or anything else, and they train them, the police, to follow the Constitution, police procedure, and all the rest, follow the laws of the state or the various municipalities and the Constitution of the state and the federal government. So now, if they train these police officers, where does the police officers start to deviate, especially when there's corrupt police departments? Well, generally, what happens is the police officers are trained in the police academy. Once they're trained in the police academy, they're assigned to field training officer. This is just general information. Certain departments deviate to some degree, but just generally, they're assigned to field training officer, which is an officer that is in the field now that trains the recruit. The recruit now is sworn in as a police officer, and he trains them. And the problem is with the deviation, where the deviation comes into play as to what uh, the recruit learned in the police academy and what he's learning from the field training officer. A lot of times in departments that are corrupt, uh, where there's systemic corruption, that the field training officer is generally the one that instructs uh, the new incoming recruit that's been trained in the police academy to forget about everything you learned in the police academy. This is how we really do it. And what he does is he transitions them from what he's learned the proper way in the police academy, which is the uh, official policy, official lawful policy of the police department. He was taught that. Later on, he's transitioned into the unofficial, unlawful policies of the police department. So, for example, if the police department wants to give out quotas, wants quotas, the reason why is they're looking for a certain amount of revenue. So it's not really about justice or anything. They may say it, but that's not really what their motivation is. So if they go out and they give out quotas for tickets, for ticketing vehicles, summonses, for arrest, quality of life, any type of quotas they create, what happens is these quotas now direct and guide these officers in the direction that is contrary to the law, because the officers now start to do things that they wouldn't normally do because in order to meet the quotas so they're not reprimanded or fired, eventually fired. So the field training officer teaches them the new way of doing business in the police department. So once he trains them in a new way, he's doing stuff that's contrary to the law, policy and official policy and procedure. The new incoming recruit that became a police officer. So now what he has to do is he has to hide his conduct because his conduct is unlawful. It's contrary to police procedure, or maybe unlawful. It's not always, but it's contrary to police procedure. It's contrary to the Constitution. It's contrary to the administrative, the patrolman's guidebook or anything else. So what happens is now these police officers learn to become very secretive, and the reason why is because they have to carry out quotas. Now those quotas, sometimes they taught to do stuff that's illegal. For example, they make a legal arrest. They make a legal arrest, for example, because if they don't, they'll be reprimanded, they'll be demoted, or they'll be reassigned. If they're in a specialized division like crimes, uh, the anti-crime squad, they may be assigned back to patrol, or some other, specialized division. They'll be assigned back to their patrol uh, duties and stuff like that. So what happens is, and also their overtime is cut then. So what happened is they learn to go along to get along. So what they do is, a lot of times, I'm talking, these are the ones that are willing to compromise their moral integrity in order to follow the departmental procedures that are inconsistent with their original training from the police academy and the law and anything else. So what happens is now they start giving out quotas. They start following them. They start issuing tickets. They can't find enough violations, so they have tremendous pressure on them for traffic citations or stop and frisk a certain number of people that are required for Terry stops or investigative stops, or whatever you want to call them. Or they need a certain number of arrests. So what happens is they wind up doing things that are illegal because the constraints are placed upon them are so great that they have no other choice other than they could be fired. So what they do is they go along, they make these false arrests without probable cause. They go and they issue summonses where it's not warranted. There's no legal basis for it. And so what happens is now the system, the police department that is encouraging these illegal activities has to cover for them. So when somebody makes a complaint about a police officer committing misconduct or criminal acts, the internal affairs, when they make a complaint to internal affairs, generally internal affairs won't do anything. The reason why internal affairs won't do anything is because internal affairs is beholden to the commissioner, the police commissioner, or the sheriff, whoever's in charge of the commanding officer, who's the chief policymaker of the police department. So what happens is the internal affairs just may take a complaint, may not take a complaint, depending upon how corrupt they are. But when they do take a complaint, they can't substantiate the allegations in the complaint. They must limit the depth and the scope of the investigation, because if they, for example, if there's ticket fixing in the police department, or there's quotas and they can't open up the whole system, if they start going deep into one officer issuing multiple tickets, bogus tickets, that's broadening the depth of the investigation. If they broaden the width of the investigation, they have to reach all the other police officers that are in the other boroughs or other departments. I mean, in other boroughs. So what happens is that the internal affairs must unsubstantiate these allegations. Now, you could have overwhelming evidence, but the internal affairs, the first thing they'll try and do is not take your complaint. Then if they feel they have to take your complaint because you're recording their conversation, or they feel there's some type of repercussion, then they'll take your complaint. But a lot of times what they'll do is they'll try and rush you off the phone. They'll get nasty with you. They'll imply that you could be arrested for falsifying a complaint. They'll do all sorts of intimidation tactics to try and discourage you, because the most important thing is they do not want a complaint officially created, because they don't want a paper trail. That paper trail later on will establish a pattern and practice of corruption inside the police department, that particular department. So what happens is, what they'll do is they'll listen to you, they'll talk to you, they'll listen to you, and then just try and get you to vent and then go away. They don't want to take the complaint. Now, the reason why they don't want to take the complaint is if they do, upon that complaint, they got to start investigating, at least give it the appearance of an investigation.